Welcome back to Hamburg. You've heard tonight from people who consider Russia to be a criminal state. But what does that mean? It means that the power of the state is at the service of one man, Vladimir Putin. It means that a select group of officials and businessmen, his inner circle, have become incredibly rich. That's because Putin is the law, and members of his inner circle can operate with impunity. It means that sometimes corruption can lead to homicide. For American-born investor Bill Browder, it all comes down to three words:
greed, money, and murder. These people are so obsessed with money that they're ready to kill anyone who gets in the way.
Sounds like a mafia.
It's a mafia that's running a sovereign state with nuclear weapons.
Browder didn't start out as a campaigner for clean government. Quite the opposite. The hedge fund manager first went to Russia more than 2 decades ago in the free-for-all days after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Here in Moscow, the fight for now is an economic fight as this country struggles to rebuild after the fall of communism.
The nation's entire economy was being privatized on the cheap.
The stuff was being effectively given away for free, and all you had to do was show up.
When Vladimir Putin took over, he promised to stop the gold rush.
He came in at a time of total chaos. The oligarchs had totally taken over Russia. 22 guys owning everything in the country, and 150 million people eating dirt. And so Putin said, we're going to get rid of these 22 guys, we're going to stop this oligarch thing, and we're going to clean up Russia.
And you believed it?
And I clapped along with everybody else. We thought, oh, this is going to be so much better.
He cheered and made a fortune as one oligarch after another was jailed, exiled, or muscled out. Until, of course, they came for him.
I arrive at the main Moscow airport, and 4 heavily armed officials said, "Follow me, sir," in Russian. And I had officially been deported because I was declared a threat to national security.
Putin was tightening his grip on power, getting rid of the robber barons he considered dangerous to his regime, and making the rest an implicit offer they could not refuse. Work with me and keep your money. That left Browder out in the cold.
25 police officers from the Moscow Police Department raid my office in Moscow, and they were specifically looking for the stamps, seals, and certificates.
A lawyer for Browder, Sergei Magnitsky, was tasked with finding out why. He quickly figured it out. Someone was using those stamps, seals, and certificates to defraud the Russian treasury out of $230 million in tax refunds. And it worked?
It worked remarkably. It was the largest tax refund in the history of Russia, and it was approved the next day and paid out 1 day later.
Magnitsky sent the evidence he was gathering back to London, where Browder was building a case against the judges, tax officials, and police officers who he says were in on the heist. They retaliated by going after Magnitsky, charging him with fraud and locking him up in one of Moscow's most notorious prisons.
They wanted to break him down. They wanted him to withdraw his testimony against the police officers, and they wanted him to sign a false confession to say that he stole the $230 million, and he did so on my instruction. And Sergei turned into this unbelievable man of steel. He just refused to buckle.
In letters from jail, the mild-mannered tax lawyer detailed torturous conditions. He was held for almost a year without trial, the cells getting smaller, the treatment harsher, his health fading. But according to Browder, that wasn't enough.
They chained him to a bed, and 8 riot guards with rubber batons beat him to death.
If he was dying anyway, why would they do such an act of barbarity? Why chain him to the bed and beat him with batons?
Because that's what they do in Russia.
Browder's crusade now had a martyr. He went to Washington.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee,
and asked Congress to pass the Magnitsky Act, which became law in 2012.
The bill is passed. The majority leader.
It placed personal sanctions on the people said to be responsible for the crime. Putin took that very personally.
Do you think that no one ever dies in American jails or what? Of course they do. And so what? Do we have to make a story out of each and every one of these cases?
Yes, we should, according to opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza.
This strikes at the heart of the system of graft and corruption and hypocrisy that we have in power in our country for the last 17 years. Democracy, human rights.
Kara-Murza, a Russian, also testified in support of the Magnitsky Act. That put him in the Kremlin's crosshairs.
People who are opposed to the current government, like my colleagues, like me, are denounced as traitors, as part of the fifth column, as American agent. But of course, slander and even imprisonment are no longer the biggest dangers that face those who dare to oppose Vladimir Putin.
Despite those dangers, information about the case kept trickling out of Moscow. Browder and his lawyer, Jameson Firestone, had a cloak and dagger meeting in a London bar with a man, Alexander Parapolichny, who said he could tell them exactly where some of the stolen money was stashed.
It was so specific as to say these tax inspectors have a villa on Frond F of the Palm Island. It was almost unbelievable.
Palm Island in Dubai.
In Dubai.
And not just Dubai. Parapolichny was able to account for another big chunk of the loot, which ended up in Switzerland. And because he was an insider, he had the bank statements to prove it.
Did you think he was putting himself at risk talking to you?
Frankly, we're at risk, and anybody who engages in helping this openly is at risk.
Parapolichny rented a house in an exclusive, well-guarded, gated community outside of London. He went jogging one day and dropped dead. The reported cause of death was a heart attack. But now, 5 years later, a classified U.S. intelligence report leaked to the website BuzzFeed purports to show that American spies had high confidence Parapolichny was murdered on orders from the Kremlin. Forensic tests also found what could be tiny traces of an exotic and toxic plant in his stomach. The poison is easily hidden in food and causes death by asphyxiation.
It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I woke up because my heart was racing. And then I started sweating really badly and feeling suddenly really weak. And then I started having trouble breathing.
When we met Kara-Murza in Washington earlier this year, he was still frail. Doctors say he was lucky to survive poisoning. What's even more remarkable is that this is the second time doctors managed to bring him back from death's door.
And of course, I knew straight away what it was, because this was the second time in 2 years that this happened, and it began almost identically in the same way. And then within 6 hours, all of my major organs shut down, just one after another.
Who do you think was responsible?
I can only presume that this was done by people with, at least, with connections to the Russian special services.
The second poisoning happened while Kara-Murza was touring Russia, screening a new documentary on his friend Boris Nemtsov. Nemtsov, the most popular opposition leader since Putin came to power, was also the most prominent Russian supporter of the Magnitsky Act.
The Magnitsky Act directed against crooks and abusers.
And another victim. On the night of February the 27th, 2015, Nemtsov was walking home from dinner with his girlfriend. The most popular critic of the Putin regime, the man who was calling for sanctions on some of the most powerful people in this country, was walking across this bridge completely unguarded. This is, after all, the center of Moscow. There are always plenty of people around, and there are cameras on every corner. But, according to Russian officials, that night, around 11:30, when Nemtsov was shot in the back at least 5 times, right in front of his girlfriend, none of the cameras captured the moment. Nemtsov bled to death right here in the shadow of the Kremlin. There was one camera that was recording that night, but it didn't capture the assassination. A city truck happened to block the view. 5 Muslim separatists were convicted of the murder last week, but Western governments and human rights groups suggest that they are just patsies. Either way, another powerful Russian voice against Putin and for the Magnitsky Act was silenced.
And as Boris Nemtsov said, this is the most pro-Russian law ever passed in any foreign parliament. And if you were to ask me what I think is the most likely reason for somebody trying to kill me twice now in 2 years, I think it's that.
So you think because you supported U.S. sanctions against Russia, the Russian regime wanted you to...
Yeah, please don't say that. These are not sanctions against Russia. These are sanctions against crooks and human rights abusers. We are Russia too. I'm Russian. My colleagues are Russian. Boris Nemtsov was Russian. He was a true Russian patriot.
And if Standing up and exposing corruption, even as others are being buried for doing just that, is the definition of Russian patriotism. Then there still are patriots left in Russia. Nikolai Gorokov is a lawyer who represents Magnitsky's family. He happened to find in a Moscow court a cache of documents seen here for the first time, which appear to show that stolen money ended up not just in Dubai and Switzerland, but also in New York City, where it was used to buy high-end property. Gorokov could have looked the other way, but he didn't.
I
photographed all the documents and then traveled to London, where the American prosecutors copied them.
That was enough for a federal prosecutor to seize the New York properties and launch a case against the Russian owners. Gorokov's testimony and the documents he provided were kept under seal for his own protection. And yet, soon enough, he had a strange accident.
And you fell down there?
No.
Yes, I woke up in the hospital and the doctor said it was a miracle I was alive. I fell 4 stories.
Do you think this was just an accident?
This could not have been an accident. Someone planned this, but unfortunately, I do not remember the details.
Gorokov, like Kara-Murza, is lucky to be alive.
Is this what happens to lawyers in this country if they push too far?
Many things happen. When the state starts covering up for fraudsters, anything is possible.
Do you think this is a campaign organized by the Kremlin?
There's no doubt about it, of course. I mean, if there seems to be an extremely high mortality rate for some reason among independent journalists and political opponents of Mr. Putin in the last 17 years.
Everybody, when they hear the Russian mafia, they think of guys with gold teeth and leather jackets. But now Russia is the mafia, and Putin is the boss.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.